minutes. In most of the cases, we will make a decision tonight after all information has been presented. If your case is denied, or if you feel that our decision was made in error, you and anyone with standing have the opportunity to appeal it within 30 days of the decision. All decisions of this commission are based on existing guidelines and ordinances. If you plan to speak about a specific project, you must have signed in. The sheet was at the back and may very well be at the podium if you haven't signed up yet. Please note that these meetings are streamed live. They are recorded and broadcast, so please use discretion with any personal information you choose to share in the course of the proceedings. All motions and decisions are made while applying all of the facts to all of the guidelines. Will all parties who plan to speak or testify stand, please, and raise your right hand? Very good, thank you. Do you affirm to tell the truth in these proceedings? Thank you. Have a seat and welcome. Will you call the roll, please?
Certainly. Mr. Cohn? Here. Mr. Daniel?
Here.
Ms. Fuller-Wilt?
Here.
Ms. Great?
Here.
Mr. Heiler? Mr. Savory? Mr. Nguyen?
Present.
We have quorum.
Thank you very much. Does the agenda stand?
We've had a few changes since publication. Under the consent agenda, 301 South Saluda Avenue, a request for recommendation for landmark status for a potentially pending individual landmark has been deferred. Under the regular agenda, 1127 Bryan Street, a request for design approval for new construction within the North Main Corridor Design District has been. For a driveway in the Melrose Heights Oaklawn Architectural Conservation District has been deferred.
Thank you very much. When it comes to the consent agenda, the Design Development Review Commission uses this consent agenda to approve non-controversial or routine matters by a single motion and vote. Examples of such items include residential site improvements such as fences, minor exterior changes, or signage. If a member of the DDRC or the general public want to discuss an item on the consent agenda at the beginning of the meeting, that item is removed from the consent agenda and considered during the meeting. The DDRC then approves the remaining consent agenda items. So would you please read the consent agenda as it stands now?
Certainly, all of the items fall under the historic portion of the consent agenda. The first is 1321, 1323 Butler Street. It's a request for design approval for exterior changes and preliminary certification for the Bailey Bill in the Melrose Heights Oaklawn Architectural Conservation District. 1002 Sycamore Avenue, a request for design approval for exterior changes and preliminary certification for the Bailey Bill in the Seminary Ridge Architectural Conservation District. Likewise, 2215 Gadsden Street, a request for design approval for exterior changes and certification for the Bailey Bill in the Elmwood Park Architectural Conservation District. And 720 Darlington Street, a request for a certificate of design approval for new construction in Earlwood Protection Area A. Likewise, we also have approval of the September minutes under the consent agenda.
Absolutely, thank you. At this time, is there anyone wishing to remove an item from the consent agenda, either from the commission or from the public? That being the case, that there is none, would someone like to offer a motion on the consent agenda?
A motion that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you very much. Is there a second?
Second.
We have seconds. Any discussion? There being none, would you call the roll for a vote? And again, this will include for the minutes of last month's meeting.
Mr. Cohn?
Yes.
Mr. Daniel?
Yes.
Mr. Heiler? Ms. Fuller-Wilt?
Yes.
Ms. Great?
Yes.
Mr. Savory?
Yes.
Mr. Nguyen?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to the regular agenda. I would like to impress upon everyone that, again, these are recorded live, and so anyone who speaks from the audience, please make sure you speak with volume and into the mic, as well as all of us on the commission. Thank you. You'll call the first case.
Certainly, the first case is 1527 Gervais Street, also known as the Whaley House. This is an individual landmark within the city. Many people probably know this as the old Dunbar Funeral Home, which has been out of commission for several years now. This landmark building is Queen Anne architectural style and was getting into fairly bad shape before Mr. Davis of the Children's Law Center saw the building and thought that it could be repurposed for use for their uses, basically, their administrative and training center. So I'll let him talk a little bit about that, but I'll just say that for the last several years, we've been working together on this project in terms of finishing up exterior repairs, removing unsympathetic additions, getting approval for that anyway with past DDRCs. Talking about plans for a new building in the back. The garage immediately to the left was a later addition outside the period of significance of the house. So staff is comfortable with approving the demolition of that building at staff level. The architects we've been working with on this project have worked and reworked and reworked and reworked with us. It has been a long, very cooperative process, and we're all pretty proud of the result of our meetings together. So, Mr. Davis, this is Harry Davis, Director of the Children's Law Center, and he was the initial force behind the whole project.
Thank you very much.
Hello, Mr. Davis. How are you?
Good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity to appear. I am here on behalf of the Children's Law Center and would first like to thank Ms. Moore and the various staff of the City of Columbia with whom we have worked very closely for, I think it's more than several years. It's been a very long-term project. I'm going to be intentionally brief with my remarks, but will remain available to answer any questions. Just to give you in 1 minute or less, the Children's Law Center will utilize the existing Whaley House with some renovation and a training center to be built in the rear of the property for the purpose of doing training for people who serve children, law enforcement, guardians ad litem, DSS caseworkers, judges, anyone who serves children will have the opportunity to participate in training programs there. There will be well over 1,000 persons per month that will be attending different training focused on serving children. The Children's Law Center is also a research center and a policy development center. We work very closely with the legislature to serve the Legislative Committee on Children, so this center helps identify issues, propose resolution of those issues, and to train the people who actually work to protect abused children. So it's really exciting that this building, which has served one community service, is now going to have a second life to serve another community purpose. And it will serve not just the university, but the greater Columbia area. There are a lot of child-serving departments and groups that will be using the resources of this center for training and other activities. As I said, I'll be available to answer any questions, and we have other folks here to actually address the design issue.
Great, thank you. I do have one quick question. You say it'll serve the university. Will that be at undergraduate and graduate level, or?
It is both. It is directly across the street from the law school,
Right.
and it is a part of the law school.
Okay.
But there are other disciplines within the university, most notably the College of Social Work,
Correct.
where they have some staff that we'll do field placements through the Children's Law Center.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, if you'd like to speak, please state your name and...
Sir, good afternoon. My name's Tim Bradley. I'm the project manager on this project. And again, as Harry said, I want to thank Amy and her staff. We've worked very closely, and as she said, iteration after iteration with them, and very proud with the plan that collaboration's come out with. First of all, I want to start out just saying that we understand and are very respectful of the prominence of the Whaley House, and we've tried to be very thoughtful and cautious in the design approach. We've worked very closely not only with Amy and her staff, but also with Dan Ellswick and others at the State Historic Preservation Office. And the goal is not only to preserve the Whaley House, but also to ensure its prominence, and maybe even make it more prominent on that corner than it is now. And we also wanted to make sure that we stayed within, met all the guidelines for historic preservation, so any modifications or additions are done in a manner to be distinct yet compatible along those guidelines. So I just want to hit a couple of points on both the Whaley House first, and then move on to the training center, and then be happy to answer any questions that anybody has. First, as it pertains to the Whaley House, on the Gervais Street side, we're opening up one of the existing porches that was enclosed long ago. And on the other existing porch that has been also enclosed, we're going to modify that to open it back up so that from the street or from the outside, it will read as a porch again. So what we're going to do is the existing windows on that enclosed porch will be replaced with ultra-clear, non-low-E glass that will be butt glazed. We'll also add columns and baluster rails to that. So from the outside, it will look as a porch. Just to clarify too, I think the rendering showed it fairly well, but the purpose of that room, it will be used as a conference or a training room for 10 to 14 people. But the finishes on the inside are going to be historic paint color that'll be relatively soft or muted. The only furniture mainly will be like a conference table and some chairs. The intent is to make sure that the finishes will not do anything that will actually draw attention to that room. I mean, we certainly wouldn't put like bright colors or neon colors or bright lights or anything in there, so that from the outside, even if there's something going on, it will be clear and look like a porch, and it'll kind of blend in. So that's certainly the intention with that. Probably the thing that we discussed the most with Ms. Moore and with SHPO had to do with the location of a fire stair and elevator tower. And after a lot of discussion and back and forth and iterations, it was determined that the northwest corner would be the best place for that for two reasons. One is that it's the least visible because it basically faces the parking area. The other is that the existing structure in that corridor is not part of the existing house. So it has really no significance as far as the historical side of that. We were able to orient that stair tower in a way and pull it in close to the building to where from the Pickens Street and the Gervais sight lines, it's pretty much invisible. You don't even notice it. It doesn't stand out. It's not butted out or anything. It's in that sight line. So we're very careful with that. The finishes of this addition will be distinct yet compatible with cementitious siding for the walls, distinct yet compatible painted shingle siding in the gable, 1/1 windows with dark bronze aluminum framing, and a dark bronze standing seam metal roof. The existing historic windows in the house would remain. However, to comply with some energy codes and to deal with the significant heat gain from the existing single pane windows, we plan to install ultra clear, again, non-low-E glass on the interior behind the window per the National Park Service Historic Preservation Guidelines. So this glass would not be noticeable from the exterior because it would basically be a single painted glass with no mullions. But what it does is it just creates that barrier to manage the heat load. Moving on to the training center, we were really careful and tried to design that in a way that also that deferred and helped with the prominence of the Whaley House. We made it shorter in height and to have relatively muted colors. There are some subtle elements like some banding and roof pitches that complement or call back to the Whaley House, but the design is distinct and non-competitive. Overall, the concept and what we tried to accomplish with the design was so that it would, in size, scale, and fenestration, that it was done in a way to be contextual and appropriate to the structures around it and the streetscape. The training center was aligned with the existing footprint of the Whaley House, again, so that it's tucked in behind there and doesn't stick out. What that resulted in is an approximate 24-foot setback from the property line right next to the sidewalk running along Pickens Street. And when we're looking at the landscape plan, due to the setback, the surrounding area, and the large shade trees that exist along Pickens Street, Utilizing a park setting in the landscape plan there seemed to be the most appropriate contextually, so that's what we've got there on the landscape plan. The finishes of the training center, again, ultra-clear, non-low-E glass, dark bronze aluminum frames, monochromatic brick with buff mortar on the lower areas, and an offset white stucco style finish on the frieze on the upper level. The roof would be the same dark bronze standing seam metal roof used on the new additions to the Whaley House. We do have some samples of like the brick and the glass and some of the siding and things. If you guys would like to see that, I'll be glad to provide those. During the process, we also met with Ms. Lucinda Stadler to address the city urban design guidelines and made the few changes that she recommended to make sure that everything addressed Pickens Street properly and that we were in conformity with those guidelines. Also met with Mr. Scott Holder and understood in that conversation that the landscape plan exceeds the minimum requirements for live vegetation and green spaces. One of the other things that we're doing for people that are familiar with that site is the corner of the site that's on the intersection of Gervais and Pickens and the area along Pickens. Currently, it's mostly concrete or asphalt. We're going to be removing that and replacing that with gardens and green space. Again, so we feel like that'll also help with the prominence and kind of harken back to the days of when it was a private residence. Again, we really enjoyed working with Ms. Moore and her staff and Dan Ellswick and SHPO, and again, very proud of the design that the collaboration's produced, and appreciate your consideration today.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who would like to add to this from your crew, or?
No, I think we're good. I've two of the architects here in case there's
Great.
some technical things and
Okay.
whatnot, just kind of have them here, but we didn't want to take up a lot of your time, just
Very
whatever on
good.
the stuff.
Well, you may want to just hang in there, and
Okay.
we'll have a few questions.
Sure.
Mr. Adams, quick question. There was a garage on the west side.
Yes, sir.
Is that also going to be demolished along with the other?
Well, the garage that's on the left side, if you're with your back to Gervais looking, the existing garage that's up on the slide now, that will be demolished, as well as the crosswalk, which is getting close to falling in, actually. There's another small building. I mean, actually, it looked like just a area. I think from talking to people familiar with the Dunbar back then, that was people would hang out there to kind of smoke or something during the funeral and things. That little thing would come down as well. So basically the only structure that would remain is the Whaley House itself.
And it's my understanding that the demolition can be handled at staff level. Is that
That's right.
very good? Any other questions from any members of the commission? Thank you, sir. Oh,
Great, thank you.
no, actually, Mr.
Actually,
Singh.
well,
Yes,
sort of
sir.
a question for staff, I guess, but
That's okay.
why don't you stay? Well, the first thing I was going to say is that this really, I do think, is commendable, and I wish that we saw more projects before us that have the restraint that the training center has in terms of the palette and the geometries. We get a lot of projects that are extremely comparatively aggressive, and I think that the restraint in this building is appropriate. It would be appropriate if it weren't just a building that was next to an historic structure. So,
Thank you.
I think that's commendable, and I agree with staff's basic assessment of the project. This is going to be a big improvement, and the structures that are being removed, even if they were just removed, would be a big improvement. But I had one question really, and it sort of jumps all the way to the end. It sort of cuts to the chase. I wasn't quite sure. There was a lot. This was 30 pages long, but so I may have missed it. But I wasn't quite sure what the one bullet point, changing the color of the roof's mechanical boxes to reduce prominence.
What that was is, if you look at the rendering on the training center, and a week ago the renderings showed those parapets being white.
Oh, okay.
And what happened is we changed it black, but to match basically the same material as the roof. But what the renderer did is he left a white band, and I believe that's what Amy's response. We just wanted that to blend in completely, so that white band would probably be removed.
Perfect,
Is that
okay.
right?
I would completely agree with that, so that makes sense.
I do have one question or so. With the garage being torn down, and from what I can see, there will be parking then provided in that.
Yes, sir. What happens
Location.
is the way that the site plan has been designed is is you will have one entrance, which will be on Gervais Street, and you'll have one exit, which will be onto Pickens. So that keeps people from exiting onto Gervais, and also it's a very, very good flow. So what happens is where the garage is now, that will be replaced with parking. But we've got more islands and trees than are required because we really are careful and that we want to break that up. We don't want people to ride by and see a sea of parking. So the way that that's broken up, that happens, and we've got currently 61 spaces, including the handicap spaces on site. That doesn't count any off-site parking.
And there will be foliage or trees perhaps between the Gervais Street and that parking area?
Yes, sir. At the entrance, the plan is to have some landscape masking of that.
Okay.
We're working out the details, but it will be a combination of trees and shrubbery. And then also there will be some plantings and stuff along Gervais Street. Not to, of course, that's the area we wouldn't want to put anything that would obstruct the view, but there would be some complementary low landscape along with the fencing that Amy mentioned.
And I see also that I'm assuming that exit area is between Whaley House and the training center?
The exit area for the parking lot?
Your vehicle?
No, sir. Actually, it would be at the rear,
Okay.
behind the training center. So that between the 20 to 25 feet between the two buildings, it would actually be used more as a courtyard. It would be a flow. We would actually be able to have some events there. People could eat lunch there or whatnot. So it would activate as basically a green space and a gathering area.
And I do believe also, I've noted that, I believe it was this case, the several cutouts will be removed to provide for additional on-the-street parking, is that?
Well, that's what when we met with Ms. Stadler and Ms. Moore, that was one of the proposals. We actually, at one time, we had sort of a drop-off area along Pickens, and in speaking with them, realized that was just not going to work with the design guidelines. So we took that off. And in order to pick up some parking that we had there, what we thought we would do is, we haven't had the conversation yet, but when we met with the city parking, we would talk about getting some street parking there. And there are some existing curb cuts that we would no longer need because they literally just butt into the building. So we would close those up and try to get some additional parking, hopefully get that dedicated, but even if it's not dedicated, it would be metered parking there.
That's awesome.
Mr. Adams, one other question. Is there any entrance off of Pickens? It looks like there's.
No, sir. The very back of the building, that's where the exit for the parking lot. That's the only ingress or egress on Pickens. Is that
Okay.
one at the back?
So that is only an exit?
That's only an exit. Yes,
Whereas
sir.
the one on Gervais is in and out?
Yes, sir. The one on Gervais is just in. The one on Pickens is just out.
Okay, thank you.
And I guess one last question, it's not clear to me from renderings I've seen, your utilities will be on the roof, and as well your sanitation garbage area.
If you pull up the site plan, the very back left corner, the northwest corner, you see that little square, that's the dumpster pad.
Okay.
So that's where that would be. The mechanicals for the training center would be on the roof. We believe that the plan for the mechanicals are to be next to the building on the Whaley House, but they would be screened with vegetation, so they wouldn't stand out.
Thank you.
I just want to note, because y'all didn't really make a big deal about it, but these gentlemen have been working not only through us and SHPO's regulations, but also USC design review, and they've never lost heart, so we
I'm only
appreciate
23, but I've aged a lot in this process.
Well, it's a tremendous presentation we're seeing, and we all in the city appreciate the Whaley House and its historic significance, and I think you've treated it very well.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? I guess at this time, I'd like to ask if there's anyone in the audience who would like to speak for and/or against this project. There being none, I will ask for then a motion.
I'll make a motion that we grant a certificate of design approval for 1527 Gervais Street with the following conditions: the final determination of the cladding material for the elevator towers, specifications for the Whaley House porch enclosure windows, details of the balustrade and front porch stairs, details of the walls and fences, all future signage and any other outstanding details be deferred to staff and that the color of the roof's mechanical boxes be changed at the top strip of white to match the rest of the roof.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve with recommendations and, or deferral to staff for several, as well as a motion, or a second of the motion. Any further discussion? There being none, would you call the roll, please, for a vote?
Mr. Daniel?
Yes.
Ms. Fuller-Wilt?
Yes.
Ms. Great?
Yes.
Mr. Hyler? Mr. Cohn?
Yes.
Mr. Savory?
Yes.
Mr. Nguyen?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, gentlemen, and we... Okay. Yes, sir.
I would be remiss if I didn't comment on one thing. I noticed Ms. Waits just come in. This project has been underway since the year 2005, and had it not been for Ms. Waits and Historic Columbia, this would never have succeeded.
Thank you, sir, for your acknowledgement of Ms. Robin Waits. Now, we have a next case, and for this case, as it's going to be now read off to us, one commissioner has had to recuse himself, so we'll make note that Mr. Savory has done so, please.
The next case is 2205 through 2209 Green Street, which is a request for a certificate of design approval for a fence in the Old Shandon Lower Waverly Protection Area A.
This is a corner lot on Green and Pine Streets that includes 2 historic houses that face Green Street. There are currently 4 different wooden fences on this property: a solid wooden fence with vertical boards along Green Street, an older traditional picket fence at the corner of Green and Pine, a more contemporary picket fence along Pine Street, and a 6-foot-tall solid modern horizontal fence along the rear property line. In April 2017, staff noticed that the fences along Green and Pine Street and the back horizontal fence had been installed without permit or approvals. The designs of the vertical wooden fences along Green and Pine Street have since been approved by staff. However, the horizontal fence at the rear of the property cannot be approved at staff level. Guidelines for fences state to install a fence or wall so that it does not detract from its associated structure. Since this fence is located in a small area at the rear of the property, it only becomes visible when traveling up Pine Street. As such, staff finds that the fence does not detract from its associated structure, which is in keeping with the guidelines. However, the second guideline for fences state to design a fence or wall so that it's compatible with the associated structure in design and materials. The design of the fence is not compatible with historic homes. A horizontal fence of this type is more modern in design. Traditionally, wooden privacy fences would have vertical and not horizontal boards. Staff finds the design of the fence is not in keeping with this guideline. So while the visual impact of the horizontal fence on the associated structure is minimal, staff finds the design is not in keeping with Section 4 of the guidelines and recommends denial. And just to note, the applicant has also planted some trees along the fence since the evaluation was written in an effort to further minimize the impact of the fence.
Trees along which fence? The
Along
pine?
the horizontal fence,
Okay, all right.
you can see they're very small right now.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Is the applicant here? And please, you've been sworn in. Come on up and state your name, please, and you've got 10 minutes
Okay.
if you need it.
Hope not. Christina Mandel, and thank you again for the opportunity to come and speak.
You'll have to speak up a little bit
Okay,
more.
sorry,
Thank you.
a little anxious.
That's okay.
So the fence is at the back of the property, and as you can see, there is a brick structure that is just beside it. That is a garage apartment, and I was hoping that that fence would be compatible with that property, since the tenant that lives in that property is a neighbor who was having a difficult time with getting the landlord to replace his broken fence. So we collaborated on that, and it was unfortunate that it doesn't go with the historical houses that I own. So in an effort working with Rachel, it was apparent that if I made the effort to try to plant some trees to hide the fence from the street view, that maybe it would be a chance to screen it and it would not be visible.
Okay.
So,
You'll have to speak up a little more, if you may. I'm sorry, but we do need to have the
Yes.
recording.
Okay. So those are 4 evergreen trees. I don't know if you can really see them very clearly on that bottom image. There are also trees on the exterior side of the lower picket fence. There's a pomegranate tree, which will ultimately be an evergreen, and there are also 2 crepe myrtles. All of those plants were affected by the strange frost that we had. So they are not as tall as they should be at this point. So that's really all I feel I can do is to try to plant more trees to block the fence from the street view.
Okay.
If there are any suggestions, I would
We'll ask members of the staff or of the commission. Do you have any thoughts or questions?
Ms. Mandel, the vertical fence is, horizontal fence roughly how, it looks like it's about 3, maybe 20 feet or so, 30 feet?
In length,
Yes.
I really don't know.
It just runs along that,
From what you see there.
it just runs along there, it's not on the, okay.
Along the back of that
Eh,
property.
And the trees you have planted are evergreens,
They're
cedar, or,
They're Japanese yews. I can't pronounce the actual.
so they should grow fairly quickly.
Yes, and I was advised by the gentleman at Southern Vistas Garden Center that if I prune them, they'll be very dense and become like a column. Should be a wall of tree, green, very solid, that would hide that fence rather well.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Anyone else? Now, are there any, we're looking at Pine Street, and
Yes.
and that is,
You don't see that fence when you're on Green Street, it's when you
That's
come
what I
up,
was just
come
gonna
up
ask.
Pine Street,
All right.
and you go past the other fence that they've installed, then this one pops up when you get to,
and fencing along Green Street is, it's appropriate, yeah.
I have a question for staff. We've seen several instances, and actually the previous presenters referenced this as well. When it comes to mechanical units and things like that, we are able to screen using landscaping. How would this scenario be different than mechanical units or other nuisances, if you will? Is my question clear?
Well, I mean, I guess this isn't actually, this is a fence.
well, let me add a second comment to that. And when someone is come in to mitigate that type of fence, which is what you would have typically around an HVAC unit on the roof, in a couple of years, these fences are probably not going to be visible coming up Pine Street.
I'm sorry, could you repeat?
No, I'm sorry, I guess the second part of that would be alluding back to HVAC units and covering them. In this case, Ms. Mandel has made an effort to mitigate the horizontal fence and with some type of evergreen that typically will grow pretty quickly. And so in a few years, this fence will probably not be visible. So I'm wondering, how that fits into everything.
I guess what we ask for in new construction is something that is compatible with the associated structure if it's highly visible from it, because we have in the past had instances where people have put in landscaping and it has died, and so then you come back to the original structure, which may be highly visible and not in keeping with the associated structure. So we've had some
In
instances.
this case, we actually have a picket fence, the vertical fence, and now horizontal fence. So we actually have 3 different fences around these 2 properties that she owns.
You know, landscaping can help if it is properly maintained. If you are inclined to think that the landscaping might help mitigate it, or that it is far enough away from the associated structure to be a more minimal imposition, you could make a motion based on those issues, and that the landscaping must be maintained for the fence to stay in place.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any comments, questions?
Well, I would
Oh,
like
yes.
to
Yes,
state
please.
that I have full intention to maintain the evergreens. They were $25 a piece, so that's $100+ investment just in those four trees.
I'm sorry. What they were trying to tell me is they can't hear us, so
Oh,
we
I
have to.
understand. Okay.
Amy, we can't hear you or her. I don't know.
You can't hear me either. I'm sorry, we have to kind of get way down on the
sorry.
table to speak.
I'm vertically challenged, so I need to lean in, I guess. Sorry.
You can yell at us, that's fine.
All right. I fully intend, the intention is to maintain the trees.
Very
They
good.
were an expense, and on the exterior side of the fence, there is a pomegranate tree which will also fill in that area on the exterior side of the fence. So unfortunately, I did not turn in my sketches prior to this, not having done this before. I would like to have been able to show what my vision is for the landscaping there. I do like to plant very densely, and can y'all hear me now? I feel like I'm yelling. Also, I'm very interested in the permaculture design concept, and so the idea of planting things that will bear fruit and things that I can share with my neighbors is very much an interest of mine. On the opposite side of the fence of the pomegranate tree, there are also 2 fig trees. While they are small at this point in time, it is my mission to try to continue to plant such things, because I feel it would be a lovely thing for my community if I could have my neighbors come by and reap the benefits of my landscaping. So there is a commitment to that.
Great. Let me just ask, you mentioned that this portion of fencing was in collaboration with the neighbor
Yes, sir.
to the other side.
Yes.
Was the original intent for privacy or security?
Yes, sir, all of the above. For many years now, he had been asking his landlord to replace his fence, which was actually falling over and being held up by cords and old handles to rakes, and it was really quite dilapidated. He is not a person of means, and actually is not living in the apartment, but maintaining his residency there because he's found an opportunity to care for an elderly person in Baltimore. But while he was in town, we did collaborate, and it was my honor to be able to participate as a good neighbor in trying to provide a fence back there for both of us. It is a duplex, and his neighbors on the other side are not, he has felt intimidated by them, and so it was an effort to try to create privacy and security for both of us.
Very good. Is there anyone in the audience who have anything to offer in favor of or against this application? There being none, any further questions from the commission? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any discussion? We'll then ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would move approval of the horizontal fence at the rear of the property contingent upon, or the mitigation factor of having shrubs that will run along that fence to in time, be a buffer, and so that fence is not visible as you go up Pine Street.
Thank you, Mr. Daniel. We have a motion, and speak into your mic, please, sir.
way that is phrased is that by using not visible, it would have to be enforced that it is not ever visible in any manner whatsoever. Is that your intent?
No, I guess we need to clarify that. Again, let me try again. That we would approve the vertical horizontal fence at the rear of the property with the property owner placing shrubbery along that fence which will help mitigate its view from Pine Street. Does that help?
And to be maintained.
And to be maintained.
And to be maintained by the owner. Yes, thank you.
If I might be permitted, I think it would
Please.
be helpful too. One of the reasons staff is a little more comfortable with this is because this fence is more disassociated from the structure, the primary structure, and that is a primary consideration here as well in terms of, I'm sorry, that's a primary consideration here as well in terms of setting precedent. If y'all are comfortable including that in the motion, I think that would be helpful.
Thank you. Might be a good point. Mr. Daniel, if you would, one more time, restate,
Well,
adding what staff has just suggested.
Let me try again. We would recommend approval of the horizontal fence at the rear of this property at the along Pine Street, and that shrubbery be planted and maintained that will help the visible impact of this fence from the Pine Street side.
With recognition that this portion of fence is a distance apart from the actual property.
Right.
And that the impact on the structure is minimal.
It's minimal.
Thank you.
Collaborative motion. Huh?
Yes, I like it.
Very good. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion? Will you call roll, please, for a vote?
Certainly, Mr. Daniel.
Yes.
Ms. Fuller-Wilt.
Yes.
Ms. Great.
Yes.
Mr. Heiler. Mr. Cohn.
Yes.
Mr. Nguyen.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Very good. Thank you so much, ma'am, for coming to see us. Our next case, please. I think Mr. Savory can come back in.
This is 1301 Fairview Drive in Melrose Heights, Oak Lawn Architectural Conservation District. This is a request for approval for exterior changes. This is a 1930s two-story stucco home on the corner of Fairview and Bratton. The original side porch was enclosed, likely in the 1950s, with the current louvered windows and door. The current request is to replace these non-original features at the porch enclosure. The proposal is to replace the windows with a vinyl 1/1 single hung window of the same size and to replace the door with a door of the same size that includes a full-length clear pane of glass. This scheme utilizes the framing already in place at the openings while allowing the porch to be fully enclosed and used as an interior space. While the replacement of non-original features can be handled at staff level, staff has some concerns with the material and style of the proposed replacement windows, but feels that the proposed door is in keeping with the guidelines. The guidelines for porch enclosures states to maintain the openness of porches through the use of transparent materials, such as glass or screen, and to place enclosures behind significant detailing so that the detailing is not obscured. The proposed style of windows for the enclosure are 1/1 single hung windows, which were chosen in part to keep the windows operable. The 1/1 style windows create a visual division to the porch openings at the meeting rail that detracts from the feeling of openness required by the guidelines. This is especially true on the front elevation, where the windows are of different sizes, so the meeting rails do not align. This, which causes a staggered division, causing additional detraction from the openness of the space. To remain in keeping with the guidelines, previously approved enclosures have included large panes of glass to keep the area visually unimpaired by grids or divisions. Windows similar to these are already located on the house directly next to the enclosed porch on the Bratton Street elevation. These are some examples of previously approved enclosures, which include just large panes of glass, and I think often these are also casement windows too. And this image shows the full panes of glass that are already on the house. Those two are not original windows, but just pointing out that that's always already been utilized on the house. Additionally, the guidelines for windows state to maintain the use of historic materials on replacement windows, and the proposed material is vinyl, which is not in keeping with this guideline. Staff finds that the request for exterior changes to the windows at 1301 Fairview Drive is not in keeping with Section 7 of the guidelines and recommends denial. To maintain openness at the porch while also allowing for operability of the windows, staff recommends using casement windows with no grids or divisions to fit into each window opening. Do you have any questions?
How has staff recommended handling the archway?
Typically, typically we would suggest doing, a full arch with glass. As proposed, he's only proposing to replace the windows, the louvered windows on the bottom, and keeping the upper part. So we can't require that he change it.
Any other questions of staff? Okay, is the applicant here? Please come forth. I don't believe you were here when we had everyone swear in. You did? Okay, very good. State your name and then please proceed.
My name is Reggie Porter, and I am the owner of 1301 Fairview, and I appreciate y'all hearing my request. Concerning the guidelines with the porches, the way that I read the guidelines is enclosing an existing open-air porch. This one was enclosed back probably in the 50s, and it says that we're supposed to maintain kind of an open feel to it, clear glass or screening. What I'm proposing to replace these with would give it a much more open feeling than what is currently there. When I first purchased the house, this was the biggest eyesore on the house. I did not feel like it fit with any of the rest of the house. And what I'm trying to do is marry the old with the new. On the Bratton Street side of the house, I've got casement windows. And then on the Fairview side of the house, I've got 8/1s, which are original, which I am repairing all of the originals that are still there. But I didn't feel like it would look right if we put a full casement window directly beside the 8/1s. In some previous approvals, let's see, Butler Street, which was included in the packet you submitted. When we look at this one, it is actually separated by the front door, where what I literally have windows that would be directly beside windows. And then also the one on Michigan Street there, those appear to be fixed windows, and I need operational windows. As far as going with an operational casement, they're considerably more expensive than a single hung 1/1. And then the only reason for the vinyl is the fact that I do want to do a dark bronze color. I can get a vinyl in a pre-made dark bronze color And when you're walking by them, you can't tell the difference between a dark bronze, any dark color. It is hard to tell the difference if there's, wood, vinyl, aluminum clad.
Got it?
That's
I'm
pretty
sorry.
much my end of it, yes,
Okay.
sir.
I didn't know if you were going to add it more. We thank you. Any questions of the commission for this gentleman? No?
Is there a picture of your suggested door?
Was there one included in the packet?
I didn't include the picture of what he proposed just because I approved that at staff level already.
Okay.
Like I said, the intent really is just to improve the curb appeal of the house, and just trying to find a happy median between what's already there and what I want to replace, which, like I said, one side has casement windows, and then the front has original 8/1, so I figured a single hung was kind of, single hung 1/1, still gives the 1/1 appeal of being able to see through like the casements are, but also it gives me the feel of the original windows, which are 8/1s. Because all the 8/1s still have the strong horizontal bar in the middle of them for the sash.
Are you actually proposing to do single-hung windows on the porch either side of the door?
Either side of the door? Yes, sir.
Okay. So those are
In
actually
total, there's
operable
5
windows?
windows, and I'd like to replace them all with like kind.
Okay.
And my question to staff and you, sir, as well, perhaps, just for my clarification, all these are not original windows, as best we know, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
I just want to make sure I've got this right. So you intend to make those windows to either side of the front door operable to lift the bottom window up?
Yes, that is my intent.
Okay.
I need to replace them one way or the other, and if I'm going to get the exact look of it where I couldn't tell walking by, I'd rather have the maintenance free. I mean, that would be my personal preference on it. But yes, that is the intent. And the other benefit of the vinyl window is I can have them made to any size that I like. I mean, they'll literally make them any size within a half inch. And I can use the existing framing that's there. It's all in very good condition.
Did you give any consideration to just all wood windows instead, or is it?
Well, the only issue with the all-wood windows, they do not fit my existing framing holes that I have there. And like I said, when I was kind of thinking, if I've got to replace it with one and I'm going to have the same look, I'd rather have something I never have to paint again. I never have to caulk where the brick molding comes together. I mean, I'm planning on using a brick mold vinyl window.
When you say they don't fit, you mean, obviously you can make custom wood windows fit anything. You're talking about stock windows that you're using, or I don't quite understand
Typically
that
wood
comment.
windows come in normally it's increments, 2-inch increments, width-wise.
You can get them custom made and you can shim them.
Yeah, and then I'm kind of worried about it being a cost issue there. And I wouldn't even be opposed to the casements, except for an active casement's considerably more expensive.
Or how about a wood window with a metal aluminum exterior? Clad type exterior. That way you got the.
Right.
These.
That's the other
The
option.
only issue I'm having there is just the fact that it's wood. I can't get a wood window that directly replaces those Jalusi windows. So then instead of a simple window swap, I'm into framing and everything else. Like I said, walking by you, it's, especially a dark color like that, you can't tell the difference.
The guidelines for this neighborhood are wood windows if it's a replacement window?
They state to maintain historic materials, but aluminum clad have been allowed.
Have y'all, huh?
And as you're aware, we have had multiple requests for vinyl windows that have been, right, but aluminum, unless they're, of course, in the back of a house where they're not visible from public right-of-way. But aluminum clad certainly, as Rachel said, would be acceptable.
Well, it's a really neat-looking house. That whole,
I appreciate it.
that whole series of Fairview is really
I've
attractive.
enjoyed getting to learn some of the history of it. Just folks, they'll kind of see someone there, stop in, and actually, I bought the house out of an estate, and the best friend of the fellow that lived there for decades and decades has actually stopped in. I've got to know him, and he's filled in a whole lot of the blanks for me on the history of the home. But no, it's a really solid, unique house. Like I said, and it's not my intention to detract from it whatsoever, but like I said, when I first purchased the house and I saw those louver de Jalousie windows, to me, that was the biggest eyesore on the house.
Very good, sir.
I have a question, sorry. On the Fairview Drive elevation, above, that space above the proposed double-hung windows, what material is that in the arch section?
I was planning on, I can get a matching aluminum in the bronze color, so we were going to wrap those in that and then trim them out.
So there's a solid?
It's glass.
Oh, it's glass?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Yeah, those areas up there are currently glass, and they would stay that way.
So those will be completely custom? Oh, that's
Those
existing
are
up in the
existing,
archway?
yes, I'm
Up
trying
in
to
the
use
arch.
those as existing.
But the center, the
And they're
center
just
one,
plate glass now, so they wouldn't detract from,
you've got you're proposing 3 new single-hung windows in that?
yes, sir.
Okay. So those little pieces up in either side, up in the arch, are existing glass?
They are.
Frameless glass? I don't see frames, so, okay.
Are the windows to the side of the door on the Bratton Street elevation, are those currently fixed?
No.
So behind all that,
On which ones now?
the bottom right, is that Bratton?
Which street are you on? I'm sorry.
The windows to the sides of the door.
That's Bratton Street.
Okay, right, those right there are roll-out louvers.
Okay.
And the louver windows are like just a brushed aluminum frame.
It just seems to me that the casement windows would be they would go better with the existing ones that were replaced, at least on the Bratton Street side, and not introduce yet a third style of window on this house. So that's kind of visually why I have an issue with the use of the vinyl windows and the style that they are, and it does seem like at
Like I
least
said, my only issue with that is just the fact that I need these windows to be operable. I'd like for someone to be able to.
casement windows that can crank out.
Right, it's a money thing. I mean, that's all.
I replaced some casement windows that were 6 feet tall on my historic home a few years back, and they're not as cheap as stock double hung windows, but they weren't terribly expensive.
Okay. I think at this point, I'd like to see if there's anyone in the audience who would like to speak for or against this application. Please come forward. Please come on up to the mic.
I'm a frequent flyer, though, so.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you affirm to tell the truth in these proceedings?
I do.
Very good. Your name?
As a long-term resident of.
State your name, please.
I'm Martha Fowler. I live on Haygood Avenue. But what I'm most known for is the historic preservation that I do on Main Street. And I have not needed to change any of the windows in my historic house on Haygood. I commend you on buying this house. This is an incredible house. I went to see it and tried to talk about 6 people into buying it, and you got a deal. So if you have to do good wooden windows, you're still getting a deal.
A whole lot.
And I don't know whether you're going to whether you're going to live there or if you're going to flip it, but
Ma'am,
I
if
hope-
you'd address the commission, please.
Okay, anyway, it's a great house, and it needs to have wooden windows. It's just a treasure. It's an absolute beautiful house, and you're gonna, if you allow vinyl windows, it's gonna come back and bite you over and over again because y'all have already made that decision over and over again, and I just want to remind you that I don't want it to come back and bite you. But please go look at this house because it is truly a gem. It is an amazing house.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else who would like to speak for or against? Would you like to have a rebuttal, or will you have the opportunity?
I'll second the fact that I think it's an amazing house.
Awesome. Very good, sir. All right, at this point then, we will ask.
I'd like to make a comment if I could. Just to address the applicant's point that he made early on about the guidelines referencing enclosing a porch, I think my interpretation of that would be that anytime maintenance is done or replacing materials is done, that we would bring it up to the current guidelines. I don't think that because this was done prior to the guidelines being passed that we can ignore them. So I agree with staff's recommendations. I think that we have to stick to the guidelines and use either wood or aluminum clad. I also think that the 1/1 double hung windows really competes with the design of the facade, and I would hate to see that happen.
Thank you, Mr. Hyler. Any other?
Only that I think Brian's comments are astute and insightful, and I agree with them.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. We are at a point for a motion. If you'd like to incorporate what your statement has been with the motion, then we're good.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion for denial for the certificate of approval for exterior changes at 1301 Fairview Drive, and ask that staff be permitted to approve any future changes as long as wood or aluminum clad windows be used in renovations to this porch.
And this is according to section what of the guidelines, sir?
7.
Thank you very much. All right, so we have a motion to deny based on guidelines and of section 8 of the 7 of the guidelines, I'm sorry, with a recommendation for future approval by staff. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion? There being none, would you call the roll, please?
Certainly, Mr. Daniel.
Yes?
Ms. Fuller-Wilt.
Yes.
Ms. Great.
Yes.
Mr. Hyler.
Yes.
Mr. Cohn.
Yes.
Mr. Savory.
Yes.
Mr. Nguyen.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you. See you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Ford.
Take care. And our next case is Avenue, prior to our last case.
Yeah, this is 1212 Haygood Avenue, which is in Melrose Heights, Oaklawn Architectural Conservation District. This is a request for certificate of design approval for an addition. This is a 1950s one-story brick veneer house that is a contributing structure to the Melrose Heights, Oaklawn Architectural Conservation District. The applicants are considering purchasing this home, but are seeking approval for an addition to first ensure that the house will meet their programmatic and spatial needs. The proposed addition is located to the rear of the existing house. It has a side gable with a slightly steeper pitched roof than the existing house, and a rear-facing dormer to accommodate a second floor. The addition would add approximately 1,334 heated square feet to the rear of this 1,438 square foot home. The first guideline for additions states to site additions so that they do not detract from or obstruct important architectural features of the existing building or others around it, especially at the principal facade. The proposed addition is located to the rear and is set approximately 5 inches in from the corner of the existing house. However, the side gable of the addition is a very prominent feature, the effect of which could be lessened if it was set in little bit more from the corner of the house. Staff typically recommends an inset of 10 to 12 inches, which would be appropriate here to lessen the effect of that prominent gable. Another guideline for additions states to limit the size and scale of additions so that the integrity of the original structure is not compromised. The proposed addition adds 1,334 heated square feet to this house. However, since the space is distributed through a first and second floor space, the footprint of the addition is smaller than the existing structure, which allows for the addition to be at a smaller scale than the existing house, which is in keeping with the guidelines. Additions in this area are also subject to guidelines for new construction. Staff has found the proposed addition to be in keeping with most of these guidelines. In terms of height, staff would like to point out that the overall height of the proposed addition would be 18 to 24 inches higher than the existing house. The height and rear dormer are used to accommodate a second floor space. However, the applicants have provided several renderings to scale that show the house and addition at a 6-foot eye height to illustrate that the height difference between the addition and the existing house will not be evident when it's viewed from street level. Generally, the DDRC policy has been to approve additions if the height of the addition was equal to or less than the height of the original structure. However, due to the distance between the ridge lines, which is 25 feet, and the provided proof that the height difference will not be evident from street level, staff finds that the height of the addition is in keeping with the guidelines. The only concern that staff has found relates to the windows and rhythm of openings. As proposed, there are no windows on the right elevation. To have a consistent rhythm of openings and to be in keeping with the guidelines, windows should be added to this elevation. Also, the window size, location, and detail should be consistent with the existing windows on the house. The existing windows use a minimal trim and are positioned just below the roof. As proposed, the windows on the addition appear slightly different than the existing windows. However, the applicants have stated that their intention is to make the windows consistent with the existing windows on the house. So due to the fact that there is considerable distance between the ridges of the existing roof and the roof of the addition, and that the renderings have been provided as proof that the height difference will not be evident from street level, staff finds that the proposed addition 1212 Haygood generally is in keeping with Section 6 of the guidelines and recommends granting a certificate of design approval with the following conditions: that the addition be set in a minimum of 10 inches from the corner of the house, that windows be added to the right side elevation, and that window height and trim details match the height and trim details of existing windows, and all details deferred to staff. Do you have any questions?
Thank you very much. Any questions of staff? Anyone?
I might add
Yes,
that,
ma'am.
that we entered into this extremely cautiously because this is not a place that we've really gone before, if y'all can hear me. We are relying very heavily on the renderings showing us that this is not going to be visible from public right-of-way. And I think it should be considered to be a bit of a test case, if you approve it, if you're comfortable with it, to see how well it actually works out in practice rather than theory.
Actually, to that point, I read that and I looked at the renderings and I was a little confused, and I guess what you mean is it's not visible because of foliage. Because if the trees come down, it's quite visible.
But also the distance from the house, the existing ridge line as well.
The addition is visible. We're talking about the height difference being visible.
Okay.
In proposals before, some people have proposed like a 2-story addition behind a
Yeah.
1-story house. It's very visible that you have that behind it.
I think I had some questions about all that and the geometries for the applicant, but something, and I'll save it for further discussion, but something seems very obvious to me as an alternative solution, but I may not understand completely.
I will say I'm comfortable using renderings in theory, but I probably have similar comments to Mr. Savory, but I would not say that we should not use renderings in the future.
I'm sorry. could-
I'm just saying, regardless of outcome, I'm very comfortable using renderings. I think that would be fine in practice moving forward.
In terms of sight lines and so forth.
Yeah.
Ms. Moore, I know our purview is not the rear, but do we have a shot of what the rear of the house is going to look like on any of these renderings?
No, it was not provided.
Okay.
Is the applicant here? Applicant or applicants, plural? Please come forward. I don't believe you guys are here for the swearing in. So when you get up, if you'll both raise your right hand, please. Do you affirm to tell the truth in these proceedings? Thank you very much. Please use the mic to your advantage and state your name.
My name is Brad Anderson, and my wife is Kelly. We have lived in Melrose Heights for 10 years. We live across the street from this home presently at 1219 Haggett Avenue. We love our neighborhood, love our neighbors. We have 4 children plus 1 due in January. So we wanted to stay in the neighborhood, and when the gentleman who resided in this house could no longer be there, we hoped that we might be able to move in and see what could be done. We've enjoyed working with Rachel and the staff. We've had a lot of back and forth with them on this design. And we're very, very proud of it for what it is. And just want to keep my remarks simple and just that, we've been in the neighborhood 10 years. We love what you guys try to do and what you do and how the city helps maintain its historic nature.
Thank you, sir. Ma'am, would you like to add anything? Well, congratulations, too, to your new addition to come. Any questions of the applicants, please?
I guess I have a question. I'm asking just because I want to understand some geometry kind of things. What part of the addition is going to be 2-story? Is there 2 stories to the addition?
Yes, there will be a 2nd story on the back side of the full addition.
Not under the gable that connects the 2 crossing gables?
There will be stair space
In that?
in there.
Okay.
Yes, I believe that was the roof line was up there for that. Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and ask a question then. Looking at this, it seems kind of clear to me that you've got a lot of different flashing conditions and valleys and so forth coming together in a way that is pretty complicated, and so therefore it's creating these 2 gables side by side. But it seems to me as if you could do this with just a simple, so the gable, where the gable is connecting the 2, the one in the middle between them, that you could do this as a simple. You've got the front gable, then you've got a back gable that's shooting off. And just leave it simply like that and put some dormers up in that gable, because nobody would care if that gable's flatter than the other gable, the existing gable. It could be flatter, and you could, especially if we pull it in 10 to 12 inches, which I certainly support staff's recommendation on that. I think you could simplify the roof geometry tremendously and get the 2-story space up there, and you wouldn't have these 2 gabled roof buildings side by side. Have you looked at that?
We wanted to, by doing a perpendicular gable, and with the back ridge line being taller, that gable would be exposed to line of vision from Sidewalker Road. This way, there's no ridge line that is viewable to where it would be obvious that it's taller than the original ridge line.
How much taller is it?
18 to 24 inches. I think the renderings, we weren't sure if the ridge cap was on there, so that's why we made a little breathing room to understand that.
Well, it seems like there might be another simpler way to skin the cat, but I do have some concerns about the 2 gables side by side. I mean, it's true as long as the trees remain in place that it's not visible from the street, but I mean, in this rendering, it's clearly visible from the street, so I don't know.
Well, we did, again, the reason we drew it this way was to minimize sight of ridgeline. And from public right of view, you will not see ridgeline except from the side, and it will look parallel or on level.
Mr. Heiler?
Question for staff. If the ridge lines were the exact same height, this would be in accordance with the guidelines?
You mean with the side gable as it is? I mean, in that case, we probably would suggest, like Mr. Savory said, it was my understanding, to be able to fit that headroom in, they had to go up a little bit higher.
But if the ridge lines were the exact same height, if the rear ridge line were not higher than the front, would that be in accordance with guidelines? Or is the issue that we have two parallel side facades?
I mean, I mentioned the fact that it is a prominent gable. We do want to try to bring it in a little bit more, but I mean, I think it would be in keeping with the guidelines.
Any others have questions of the applicant or staff?
May I add?
Please.
The rear ridge line, if it were to be level with the front ridge line, we originally tried to finish the upper attic, and we're about 6 inches shy of being able to have valuable square footage. So that's the reason for the raise in the rear. So I don't know if that answers Mr. Heiler's question, but that is.
No, I understand why you did what you did. What I'm trying to understand is why contextually it doesn't work with the guidelines. And so if it were the same height, would it fall within guidelines or not? It's kind of what I'm trying to understand.
I think the whole answer to that question hinges on whether or not it's visible from the street. Right? I think that's a real question, though. I mean, I understand from the photographs that there are trees in the way, but it's plainly obvious from the rendering that if the trees weren't in the way, it'd be very visible from the street. I mean, I'm not saying whether or not how I feel about granting a certificate here. I'm trying to be clear on that.
Step up.
No, I know you're not. I know.
We're just saying that because it's so far back, the height.
No, I understand. Yeah, they're two different questions. I don't have any problem with the difference in the height of the gables. I think that's not, in my mind, not an issue at all.
Is there an architect involved, or are you just using a designer to design this for you?
Yes, we've been using Lloyd Higbee. He's been our draftsman to draw this for us.
But he's not an architect. He is?
Yes. We've used, and he advised us, this was, and we ran it by staff to do the parallel, because then it wouldn't be as perceptible if we were to bring, a fuller height gable and tie it into the existing ridgeline. We were worried that would be really conspicuous from the public right of way. So, our desire is to fit in the neighborhood. We love this neighborhood.
Yeah.
We can't quite hear you.
We love this neighborhood, and we want to. Now you can hear me. We want what you want to, and we would love to be able to stay and have a little bit more square footage for a family of 7, but still not have a house that looks, sprawling. So
What are your landscaping plans for that portion of that side of the house?
Well, there are a lot of mature camellias, and we would like to keep them if we can. That would be priority, to keep any of the desirable plants that are existing. Clearly it needs to be cleaned out. There's some overgrowth, but there's some dogwoods, there's some camellias.
I'm sorry if I missed this, but what's the exterior building materials used on the addition?
Hardy plank as recommended to us, but
Thank you, folks. Anyone in the audience like to contribute in favor of or against? Please come forward. We'll have you raise your right hand, and then you can tell us who you are.
My name is Susan Alexander. I live catty-cornered across the street this way from there.
Do you affirm to tell the truth in these proceedings?
I do.
Very good. Okay.
I've lived in my house. I bought my house in 2009. They were already there. And when I moved in, they just had their second baby. And now they're getting ready to have their fifth baby. And the house that they're in now looks almost exactly like that. And they've just extended it back as far as they can. And that's why they were making the decision, from what I understand, to move. And everybody right there is just, we all love the neighborhood and love the neighbors. And everybody looks out for each other. And we were just, we were all hoping that it would work out where they could buy this house and stay right where they are.
Thank you.
Fifth one coming along. So.
Very good. Any questions, comments from commission? Lead us to a motion.
I think it's a little geometrically odd, but I also think it is. I think staff is right that it will be for the most part not visible from the street, which I'm placing a lot of faith in that in terms of the compatibility with the neighborhood. But I think that it's very important that the addition be pulled back. I'd say at least 12 inches. From the lines of the existing structure in order for that to work. Other than that, I guess I don't have any strong other comments other than what staff has proposed.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Mr. Heiler? No? Okay. That leads us now to a motion. Anyone like to offer a motion for this property and its new addition?
I would move approval subject to granting a certificate of design approval with the following conditions: that the addition be set in a minimum of 10 inches from the corner of the house, that windows be added to the right side elevation, that the window height and trim detail be adjusted to match the height and trim of the existing windows, and all details deferred to staff.
Could we change that to 12 inches? Would that be okay with you?
Fine with me.
And keeping...
Just a little more.
And
if that works for the applicant.
And this motion comes with firm recommendation that this be in details deferred to staff.
Yes.
But section what of the guidelines, sir?
Section 6, excuse me.
Thank you. We have a motion for approval with recommendations and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, would you call the roll for a vote, please?
Mr. Daniel?
Yes.
Ms. Fuller-Wilt?
Yes.
Ms. Great?
Yes.
Mr. Heiler? Mr. Cohn?
Yes.
Mr. Savory?
Yes.
Mr. Nguyen?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Congratulations, folks. We look forward to seeing the finished product. That takes us to our next case. I called it as the last case, but certainly a case we look forward to having brought before us again. Please.
Good afternoon. Last but certainly not least, this is a request for new construction of a modern one-story brick structure, approximately 8,206 square feet, on the property at 2117 Gervais Street in the Waverly Protection Area. The proposal was heard at the September DDRC meeting. A subcommittee meeting was found to be desirable in order to address some design issues. After the subcommittee meeting conducted on September 25th, some fenestration and articulation changes have been made to improve the articulation in wall massing and pedestrian engagement. The building parapet brick wall has been lowered from 20 feet, 8 inches to 18 feet for a total reduction of 2 feet, 8 inches, and the applicant has enlarged the windows on the more visible facades in response to comments from commissioners. These are helpful improvements. Staff still has concerns about the prominence of the building's main entry, which is emphasized by both the elevated topography of the site and the massing of the EIFS panels at the entry. It is certainly desirable that entries be clearly delineated, but the scale and proportion of this entry per the district guidelines, specifically building compatibility, should relate to the more modest scale of both nearby historic residential and commercial structures. While the scale does not have to exactly correlate with existing scale of entries, it is a far distance from those that are extant. Staff finds that this project meets significant portions of Section 11 of the Waverly Protection Area Guidelines and recommends approval of the request with the following conditions: reducing the scale of the tower clerestory feature, reducing the height of the parapet wall still further, landscape wall details to staff, HVAC unit specifications, all window and door specifications to staff, and all details deferred to staff.
Thank you, ma'am. I believe we have an applicant here. Architect, please come forward, sir. And I don't think you were here for swearing in.
Well, I was.
You were?
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
very good.
I wasn't the last time.
Good to see you.
Thank you for having me back. I apologize that the folks representing Eau Claire are not here. They had an important meeting and sent me on my own. I want to remind you, if you don't know who Eau Claire Cooperative is, they were founded in 1981 by Dr. Stuart Hamilton, who based the entire existence of the organization on the biblical story of the Good Samaritan. As folks walked by and didn't take care of the victim of a crime, finally somebody did who felt sorry for him. Dr. Hamilton felt that there were many people in the community who were underserved or not served at all, and felt that there needed to be something done about that. So that's why he started this organization in the Eau Claire community. He's been there, now they've been a part of this community for 36 years. He has since expanded to the 4 surrounding communities, Richland, Lexington, Fairfield, and I think Calhoun. He has multiple locations, over 500 employees, and they serve 50,000 individual patients each year, 50,000. So they are quite large now. So from his humble beginnings to this point in the organization, they've come a long way. The existing building that's on the site sort of represents who Eau Claire always has been, which is a fairly humble organization. If you go by the building now on Gervais, you hardly even notice it. The new building, we believe, is designed to more accurately reflect its new position in the community, in that it has more presence, more prominence, and is not only looking to serve the present, but also to the future. So this building is sort of a reflection of that new place that it's in. We have two other facilities, one being built in West Columbia and one starting now in Eastover, both of which have gone to the more modern look. We believe this building has got a modern look yet that does meet most of the requirements of the Waverly neighborhood, as pointed out by staff. Regarding specifically the height of the building, while I agree with most of the recommendations of staff, I'm a little concerned about continuing to try to reduce the height of the building. The brick wall parapet on the right was actually originally designed 21 feet tall, and then based on staff recommendations prior to our first presentation, I reduced it just a few inches, but it's now 18 feet. So we've gone from originally 21 feet to 18 feet, so it's quite a dramatic reduction in height. If you have a 9 to 10 foot ceiling height inside the building, 3 feet of plenum space above that for air conditioning and heating ducts and lighting, a couple of feet of structure and a couple of feet of roof slope, and then add on top of that 2.5 to 3 feet of parapet wall, you're up in about a 20-foot tall wall. We're at 18 feet, so I believe that we're at the very low end of where a one-story building might be with a parapet wall. I've done many retail buildings and office buildings that are similar to this, that the walls have been 20 to 24 feet tall. Retail strip centers quite often are 24 feet tall that are only one story because they want to be seen and they need places for lights, signs, canopies, and things like that. So the height of this building at 18 feet is not the least bit high or unusual. The prominence of the entrance is purposefully. We wanted to bring attention to the entrance. In this case, we are facing Gervais Street on recommendation of staff and the guidelines, which we're happy about, we like. But it doesn't face the parking lot where all of the patients will be coming from. So the purpose is sort of to help guide them around to the front. If you don't have some sort of prominence and noticeability to that, they might not know exactly where to go, especially if you look at the floor plan, you can't see it here. That left side of the building that faces the parking lot has a couple of entrance or actually exit doors. It's the very top elevation. Those two pieces of glass, the one on the far left and then the next one to the right of it, there's some doors in that vicinity, one of which on the left is an ambulance and staff entrance and exit, and the one on the right would be for folks who have already been served inside the building and are leaving so that they don't have to go all the way back through the waiting room out to the front door to Gervais Street and around to the parking lot. They would come out that door to leave. We'll probably have a lock on that door so you can't get in it, but you can always get out of it. So we want to make sure that they don't confuse the entrance to one of those locations. We want them to know they're coming out front, and if you look at that top elevation, you can see with the height and the prominence of the entrance, it pretty well, tells you that that's where you need to go to walk in the building. So I don't feel like the building is too tall. I don't feel like it's inappropriate for a one-story building. I feel like it's trying to give a little bit of prominence and recognition to the site so the folks that are in the Waverly community who might not know that Eau Claire exists and might not know what they do to serve the community will maybe not miss it. There's very few, if any, existing commercial structures nearby to compare it to, at least not on that side of the street. The closest larger building is down the street, which is in Millwood, is the large church, which is a very, very large structure, much larger than this one. So we would certainly agree to the staff's recommendations for the last four items. I would prefer at this point not to reduce the scale of the tower, clear story, or the parapet wall. And by the way, thank you to staff and to the subcommittee that we formed to get together and do this. And I think that all of the changes that were made have been an improvement. And generally that's what happens, and that's a good thing, and I appreciate everybody's involvement in this. You also mentioned at one time, either in, I don't remember if it was written here, or you mentioned the lines of the stucco trying to line up more with the brick. And we can certainly, the horizontal lines and the stucco above, at least above the right and left sides of the entrance, don't line up with the horizontal lines in the brick, and I can make a change to fix that. I don't have any issues with that. That would probably be an improvement as well. So that's where I stand at this point, and I thank you for your time to allow us to make this presentation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Questions?
I have one question. The total height of the building, I just can't make it out on such small font. Is it 2510?
2510, yes, that's correct. Okay. That's to the very top of the highest point.
Okay, so the highest point is almost 8 foot above the top of the parapet.
It originally was 2710, and it's been brought down.
Mr. Ito, it looks like the right side of the building, is that a few feet higher than the front side along Gervais?
All of the brick walls around the entire building, well, on the front and sides, all the brick walls are exactly the same height.
Okay,
18
it's
feet.
just this picture that's...
Yes, it might be deceiving in that regard. The stucco is the only area that is taller.
I wasn't here last month. Did y'all give any consideration to trying to sort of more closely replicate the building that they built a couple of years ago behind this one?
Yeah, it was actually more than a couple of years ago. You're talking about the one facing Hardin Street?
Yes, Street.
Yes. We actually, I had the opportunity to design that building as well, and the intention with that building was purposely to go with a Prairie design or Frank Lloyd Wright inspired design. And we were just, it's a nice design. I think it turned out really well. But no, we specifically didn't go that route on this time because we were trying to bring it to a more contemporary look, more future look.
More emphasis.
Yes, sir. More emphasis on the future of it and present rather than past. Yes, sir.
Anyone else have questions?
Well, I would say that the change of the fenestration on the right-hand side of this rendering is a huge, huge improvement. I guess I still, and I don't personally have so much trouble with the height of the tower. I mean, to me, it seems as if the proportions and the way it masses out is not bad. I understand the desire to have a prominent entrance. I still feel as though that the masonry on top of those windows, though, the height of that parapet is huge. I guess the problem is that you're sloping all the way across the building to get to the back. So it's just one continuous slope across that broad expanse, which is what's really causing it to be so high.
What is your roof slope?
Quarter on 12, and it's about a 70 or 80 foot deep building.
So, I mean, you obviously you could create a different kind of configuration on the roof so that you didn't start out so high. If you, for instance, had internal, I assume you're just draining off the back. You have.
We're taking it all to the back to an exposed gutter and downspouts to eliminate worries about interior gutters. There's a lot of oak trees in the area to drop leaves and.
Well, I mean, we don't have the purview to tell you how to drain and all of that, but that is, I think, what's causing the problem, because it really does look like a two-story building with no windows on the second story as a result. So there are other ways to solve the problem, but we can't. That's out of our purview. But I guess I am still concerned. I think it's a big improvement. But I am still concerned about what appears to be a second story with no windows. And I mean, you've gone through the explanation. I understand your explanation, but I know there are other ways to skin a cat. At any rate, it's your decision to slope the entire roof back, and that is the least expensive and probably the most likely to be maintenance-free. So I understand why you're doing it.
As I remember, too, not to really interrupt you, but there was some indication there would be signage along that upper brick facade.
There was a question about doing sort of super graphic kind of signage, but to me, I think that would make it worse.
Yeah, right. We try to fit signage into the architecture of the building in places where it normally would be, so
I guess
that's a large expanse for signage.
Yeah, it seems like it would be way out of scale with what you would want to do, but I guess there's two things that to wrap up my comment. One is on the Pine Street side, I guess it is, the right elevation as you're calling it. You've got taller, and I think you have the same on the other side. You've got, I think they're more like public areas, but you've got taller windows.
They're approximately 10 feet to the top of those windows, I believe, yes.
So that helps proportionally. It would help if you could do the same thing on the front facade. And then the only other thing I would say is I would agree with staff, is to continue to bring down the parapet a little bit more. I personally am not too concerned about those HVAC units. They're way back in. From Gervais Street, the building is way up on a hill. I don't think you'll see them, and if you do, I don't think it would be as objectionable as having a really tall brick parapet. So I mean, I wouldn't have any problem with bringing that parapet down further. I know originally it was in order to screen those HVAC units, but I just don't think that's a big problem. I think the bigger issue is still a tall parapet. It's better, it's a lot better, but I still think it's a big expanse of brick that's not too difficult to... So I would say, I would just support the idea of bringing that parapet down, but then also raising those windows up so that they're similar to what you have in that other space on Pine Street. And then I think you've gotten most of the way there of solving that plus the banding that you've talked to the staff about. You got a couple steps going on in the tower, so it might be that if the lower piece, not the center part, but the two sides, if they also came down some along with the brick parapet, I think the proportions of everything might sort of give everything a little bit more breathing room. You know what I mean? So the centerpiece maybe stays similar to what you have it, but the two side pieces where you have the stucco, they also drop a little bit. Then I think, because right now everything's sort of crammed all together, in height, I think you might get a little bit more variety and a little bit more breathing room geometrically. I think it'd be helpful. If you follow what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Mr. Otto,
Yes, sir.
on the tower, what is the material above the doors and the windows?
That's still stucco or ephes. It's just a different color.
Okay.
Gray and...
So it's not windows, is what I was driving at.
Correct. It's not. It's solid wall.
The EIFS panels comes in a large panel.
Question for Steph. I know that EFS is not allowed in the city center design district. Is that not the case in this area? The city center guidelines require hard coat stucco.
I think as long as it's a visually compatible material, it's going to be okay.
When I say ephes, it probably will end up being, it has the same look on the exterior, but it'll probably end up being a hard coat or cement board stucco system without styrofoam underneath it.
Makes all the difference when you wrap it with your knuckles.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so
you can't put a fork in it either.
That's right. I like the hard coat much better, the hard backup system. I understand your comments just for feedback. It's hard to know how far to keep going. Originally, I was 21 feet, now we're 18 feet. I understand you're saying it can go lower. I don't know if 8 inches makes any difference, 16 inches.
No, I understand that. I appreciate that. I think that basically it is about changing the proportion of glass to brick so that you have more glass than brick, which I think you actually can accomplish. And I think if you took the height of the glazing that you have on the Pine Street side, where it's taller, and you raise the glass, and then you also, because you could even see there that it makes all the difference in the world. And then I think if you brought the parapet down more, almost to a kind of a gravel stop kind of relationship to the roof, you'd be there. It's really a matter of switching the proportions so that you don't have as much, or even looks like more, masonry above the window head height than you have below the window head.
Right. Your comment regarding bringing it down to a gravel stop height, though, I'm afraid that we
Just
would
less-
we would really see HVAC units if it's brought down that low.
Although,
I mean, if you can see the back elevation, that they're already above the height of the parapet wall, you won't see them.
right, how far back in the building are they? If we were, for instance, to look on the right elevation, are they, are they all over the place, or are they
Well,
more or
I
less?
think there's going to be 4 or 5, or even maybe 6 of them. So we obviously want to keep them located over each zone, so they'd probably be in 6 different quadrants of the building, some in the front, some towards the back.
But I would think you probably,
We've got a comment by staff, please.
Go ahead, Mr. Sager.
I would think the closest you would need to get to the front edge of the building maybe is 20 feet. You could pull it back that far, probably, right?
I think I could get it.
So I'm thinking you're not going to really see it much, and I don't know,
Well, based on the proportions of the Pine Street side with the taller windows in the conference room, there isn't very much, like you said, the proportions are different. There's not a lot of brick. I don't see where it would be necessary to bring it down more than, I don't know, maybe 16 inches.
I kind of agree. I mean, I think that the whole, in my mind, the whole point is, right now, it's a lot better than it was, but on the front facade, right now, you still have more, if you take the head of the window height, you have more above it than you have below it. So you've got, it's still massively a brick facade, but I think if you could raise that window head and you could drop the parapet, just do more to drop the parapet, I think you're going to flip the proportions in a way that would make it successful.
What I was going to say is that I believe building code only requires like a 30-inch parapet wall for screening.
To my knowledge, that's the minimum, I guess, you're supposed to have.
Do you have bases?
You'll have to
underneath-
speak up, ma'am.
I'm sorry, do you have bases underneath the HVAC
They
units?
do, they
or-
sit on a curb, and those are maybe a foot tall, and I don't know how large the units are, but I'm thinking that they're maybe 3 feet tall, so they probably stick about 4 feet above the roof level.
So maybe if we could concentrate on keeping those bases as low as possible, and then I think they have to come 10 feet off the edge of the roof, just so people working on them can't fall over the edge.
They do, or you can have a railing to protect, but you try to keep them 10 feet away, yes.
We're really comfortable that the parapet's going to hide most of these in terms of
What is
screen.
your roof height
The
on the
lower-
front of, on the Gervais Street frontage?
What is the roof height?
Yeah.
Where?
Along Gervais Street, at the, where the roof butts into the parapet.
Well, the back, I think, is 14 feet tall. At the gutter in the back is 14, so it must be about 16 feet up at the front.
And your windows now are 6 feet high on the front?
The windows on the front are 8 feet to the top of the windows. As you can see, they don't go all the way down to the floor. I think I kept them either 30 or 32 inches above the floor so that they were, so that the window was above a desktop height. And then they go up to 8 feet tall presently. If I do as Mr. Savory suggested and bring them up to 10 feet tall, that would be, which would match the conference room side, that would be fairly tall. Those are all offices, but 10 feet, nobody will complain about a 10-foot ceiling in an office.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Tom's comments. I think the Pine Street windows are much more successful, and I even like the idea of bringing them down to mirror what you did on Pine Street as well. I mean,
Bringing what down?
Bringing them down.
I don't think you could, that'd be tough, because it's office space, but, I mean, I think raising the head would make a huge difference.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any further discussion here from amongst commissioners?
Yes, sir.
The windows on the Pine Street, is that also an entrance?
No, there are no entrances well, there's a door over there towards the back, the far right-hand side
I
of
see
the Pine
that.
Street. That's really just an emergency exit.
So these windows go down basically down to the ground,
They do. The ones in the conference room go down to the floor.
which means you'll have to have a different type of glass in that because it's right to the, yeah.
Correct, they will be tempered. The other ones probably, in most cases, won't have to be. But visually, they won't look any different.
Thank you. Any further questions of staff? No further discussion. How about a motion?
Okay, let me try. I make a motion that we grant a certificate of design approval for 2117 Gervais Street with the following conditions: that the parapet height continue to be reduced further as possible, that the windows across the Gervais Street facade, the head of those windows be raised, I think it's 2 feet, but to match the higher head height that you see on Pine Street. That landscape details, HVAC specification, unit specifications, and all other window and door specifications and details be deferred to staff per section 11 of the guidelines.
Do you want to specify height or how this?
Do you want to?
I would just ask that those details, as it relates to the EFS sections and the tower and height, all be deferred for approval to staff.
Amend my motion.
All right, so let's get a clear and amended motion, succinct altogether, if you will. So we will ask for another, for a,
There you go.
for a full motion.
All right. I'm making a motion that a certificate of design approval be granted to 2117 Gervais Street with the following conditions: that the windows along the Gervais Street facade, the head of the windows be raised to match the taller head of the windows on Pine Street, that the parapet, the masonry parapet, be dropped further as possible, that the proportions and the heights of the tower elements also be reduced or adjusted to be approved by staff, and that the landscape details, the HVAC unit specifications, all window and door specifications, and all other details be deferred to staff.
And if I may add, that this motion would be according to section
According to section
11
11 of the guidelines.
of the Waverly Protection Area Guidelines. Thank you.
I'll second it.
We have a second as well. Any further discussion? If you'll call the roll, please.
Mr. Daniel? Ms. Fuller-Wilt?
Yes.
Ms. Grate?
Yes.
Mr. Hyler?
Yes.
Mr. Cohn?
Yes.
Mr. Savory?
Yes.
Mr. Nguyen?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Good night.
Give our regards to the Eau Claire community. All right, so that ends our business of the day. Is there other business from staff that we need to cover?
There is not.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a motion to adjourn in tandem and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, folks.
Thank y'all.
Thank you for y'all's comments. I couldn't hear Amy. I don't know. I noticed that in city council when I was going through something the other day that nobody could hear anybody.